Well, Jason here, going live today on Galatians 1:10 is the correct verse that I'm going to be breaking down today. Galatians 1 verse 10. This is the last verse in kind of the heading. In many of the Bibles, there's only one good news. There's only one gospel. There's only, in this heading, this verse is the last one in this little section where Paul is addressing this. And he says, obviously, I'm going to read from the NLT. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. Wow. Very powerful verse there. So a few things that I had in my notes there for Galatians 1:10. Is that it's about pleasing God, not pleasing people, looking for God's approval, not man's, being Christ's servant, not man's, to serve Christ, not man, to please Christ, not man, to seek Christ's praise, not man's praise, to go after God's approval, not man's approval. We can all learn from that. He said, he's not trying to win the approval. The goal was to please God. We know that Scripture says that faith pleases God, obedience pleases God. So we know that Paul was being obedient. We know that he was preaching in faith, and that those things pleased God. So our goal then is ultimately in our life is to live life for God's approval. Now, we know that God has already approved us because that's what the cross did. But what Paul is saying here basically is like, I'm living to live a life of obedience to God, not to man, not to be a people pleaser, but to be a God pleaser. And we know that faith pleases God, and we know that obedience pleases God. That we receive his approval in that. And so that unity, that trust, that love, and in context, what he's saying is I'm not preaching man's gospel. I'm not preaching what man wants to hear. I'm preaching the gospel of Jesus. God's grace working by faith and leading to obedience. That's when we tie it together for that approval, is that we have God's grace, but it works by faith. That is proven and leads to obedience. And so we know that is how we get it. He says, basically, I think of it this way. He's saying, if I was in this for man, I wouldn't be serving God. I'm not doing this to build a following. I don't care how many, today we could say that is, I don't care how many people are following me right now. That this leads us to remember to check our hearts. And I love what he's saying. Ultimately, what Paul is saying is, I'm not for sale because I've already been bought. Come on, say that. I'm not for sale because I've already been bought with the blood and the sacrifice of Jesus. And so he's a servant of Christ, not by hire, but by purchase. He's not for sale because he's already been bought. Well, that concludes that section of Galatians 1. Talking about the gospel and this other gospel that is being preached. Hopefully you found this helpful. Like, share, comment, leave your questions, leave your any observations that you have, or even any critiques. Love to hear what you have to say, and have a great day. And let me know how I can be a blessing to you.